Here is the contradiction. Some people spend longer in bed and still wake up drained, while others sleep for a shorter time and move through the day with surprising clarity. So perhaps the real question is not simply how long you sleep, but what your body is actually able to do with the sleep it gets. To see why, we will follow a pattern often associated with Japanese daily life. Not glorifying too little sleep, but protecting rhythm, recovery, and alertness with far more precision. Morning begins quickly. The alarm goes off. Light enters the room. The city starts moving almost at once. But not everyone who opens their eyes is truly awake. Some people have already left the bed, washed their face, put on clean clothes, stepped onto a crowded train, and joined the flow of the day, while their mind still seems to be lagging somewhere behind. The body is moving forward, but the brain has not quite arrived. It is a feeling many people know well, not exactly pain, not exactly overwhelming, sleepiness, more like a quiet heaviness that hangs over everything. You can still function, but more slowly. Simple tasks ask for more effort than they should. Concentration feels expensive. Starting anything takes a little more force than usual. Then by midday, that feeling has not disappeared. It has only changed shape. Drowsiness becomes irritation. Irritation becomes mental fog. Mental fog becomes a flat, scattered exhaustion, even though the day is still far from over. From the outside, the conclusion seems obvious. Perhaps you just did not sleep enough. But the truth is often less simple than that. There are nights when you spend plenty of time in bed and still wake up as if your batteries were never really charged. And there are other nights when your sleep is shorter than ideal. Yet you somehow move through the next day with a usable level of clarity. The difference often lives in something quieter than total hours. Whether your routine is stable, whether your brain was given a chance to slow down properly, whether your sleep was deep enough to restore you, whether you woke at the wrong moment in a heavy phase of rest, and how you managed your energy while you were awake. In Japan, one idea appears again and again in daily life: regularity. Not because everyone lives perfectly, not because everyone gets ideal sleep, but because when life is busy, rhythm becomes a form of protection. A fairly consistent waking time, a familiar sequence in the morning, a short, intentional pause in the middle of the day instead of pushing until collapse, an evening that lets the brain dim gradually instead of crashing from exhaustion. These habits may look small from the outside, but to the body, they act like markers on a road, helping the inner clock avoid getting lost. Many people imagine that staying sharp is mainly about pushing harder. One more coffee, one more task, one more message, one more episode, one more stretch of scrolling to switch off. But what feels like rest is sometimes only a change in the shape of fatigue. The body is already tired, yet the mind is still being held in a stimulated state. Then you get into bed with tired muscles and an alert brain, and that is where the contradiction becomes painfully familiar. The more exhausted you feel, the less deeply you may actually recover. Japanese sleep culture is often misunderstood from a distance. The lesson is not that sleeping less makes you stronger. If there is something worth learning, it may be this: when longer sleep is not always possible, the quality of recovery matters even more. Rather than letting the body fall straight from tension into bed, many people build a transition: softer light, a slower pace, dinner not too late, a warm bath, fewer inputs that keep the mind working long after the day should have ended. The point is not to create an elaborate ritual. The point is to signal to the nervous system that the most demanding part of the day is over. That matters more than many people realize, because sleep does not come only from tiredness. It also comes from a sense of enough safety to let go. If you drag the full speed of the day all the way to the edge of the pillow, your body may sleep in a shallow and fragmented way. You may lie still for hours, but somewhere underneath, your system never fully loosens its grip. Then morning arrives, and what you receive is not clean restoration, but only a slightly less painful version of depletion. We often look only at the night when we try to explain the morning, but daytime alertness is part of the story too. In Japan, the sight of someone briefly dozing on a train or using a short break to rest is not especially unusual. What matters here is not chaotic compensation or endlessly catching up on sleep. It is the idea of timing. A short rest used deliberately can work like a soft reset for a brain that is starting to slide downhill, not as a replacement for nighttime sleep, not as an excuse to live in chronic deprivation, but as a way to stop the second half of the day from sinking into dullness, mistakes, and emotional wear. Everyone has felt some version of this. When you are badly under-recovered, you do not just become slower. You often become harsher with yourself and with the world around you. A small message feels irritating. A routine task feels oddly heavy. A minor mistake feels much bigger than it is. A tired brain is not only weaker at focusing, it is also weaker at regulating emotion. That is why the price of poor sleep is not simply more yawning. Sometimes the deeper cost is that the whole day becomes sharper, colder, more confusing, and less forgiving. And then we reach for the familiar rescue methods that do not always rescue much at all. Another coffee, more sugar, more sitting, more endurance, more forcing. These things can drag you forward for a while, but they can also pull your body clock further out of tune. If stimulants come too late in the day, they can linger into the evening, leaving you tired but unable to settle. Then a loop begins to form. Shallow sleep at night, a heavy head in the morning, an energy crash after lunch, dependence on stimulation in the afternoon, and another restless night waiting on the other side. What often stands out in Japanese routines is not explosive energy, but steady energy. Instead of waiting until they are completely drained, people may divide the day into gentler, more breathable segments. A short walk, a bit of daylight, water, stretching, a change of posture, a brief break from the screen, meals that do not leave the body overburdened, a short rest before the system starts demanding one by force. None of this is glamorous. None of it looks like a dramatic productivity hack. But it fits the way the human body actually works. Sustainable alertness usually responds better to small, timely adjustments than to repeated acts of self-violence. There is also a common misunderstanding that if you hit the correct number of hours, everything should feel fine. But the body is not a machine that performs well, simply because the quantity was technically sufficient. It also needs rhythm, it needs repetition, it needs reliable cues for when to rise and when to ease downward. Someone who goes to sleep at wildly different times, wakes at a different hour every day, pushes themselves until mental burnout, and then tries to numb that burnout with screens may still feel foggier than someone who sleeps a little less, but lives in a more stable pattern. Of course, none of this means sleep duration does not matter. It matters deeply. There is no clever trick that can turn chronic sleep deprivation into a healthy lifestyle. There is no method that lets the body stay well while it is repeatedly denied the recovery it genuinely needs. But in ordinary life, sleep is not always ideal. Schedules shift, work expands, responsibilities spill over, and in those imperfect conditions, what helps most is often not squeezing more productivity out of exhaustion, but removing some of the habits that make sleep lighter and waking life more chaotic. So if we had to reduce the lesson to its simplest form, it might be this. Do not ask only how long you slept. Ask whether your body was given a rhythm it could trust. Do you wake at completely unpredictable times? Do you carry too much stimulation right up to the moment you try to sleep? Do you wait until your energy is fully collapsed before responding to it? Do you treat rest as something you have to earn, rather than something that protects the rest of your day? Sometimes the most meaningful change does not begin with adding 1 or 2 extra hours immediately. Sometimes it begins earlier than that, in quieter ways. Evening arrives a little sooner inside the mind. Bright light softens. Screens lose some of their hold. Food is not pushed too late. The body receives a clearer message that the day is closing. Morning begins at a more consistent hour. Midday no longer becomes a private battle of endurance. A short pause is allowed before the nervous system starts collecting interest on what has been ignored all day. And perhaps this is the most valuable insight of all. people who seem to carry more stable energy are not always stronger than you. Often they are simply less at war with their own body. They do not force wakefulness long after the system is overloaded. They do not keep throwing stimulation at a mind that is already smoking. They do not wear depletion like a badge of honor. They notice the signs earlier. They adjust sooner. They work with the body before the body has to fight back. A clearer day does not usually begin with the ambition to become perfectly optimized. More often, it begins with things that are far less dramatic, an evening that stops stretching itself for no reason, a brain that is allowed to dim instead of collapse, a waking time that becomes more reliable, a short rest used at the right moment, a way of staying alert that does not make nighttime sleep more fragile. These things do not transform you into a new person overnight, but they can return something extremely important: the feeling that your mind still belongs to you as you move through the day. And if lately you have been waking with persistent heaviness, feeling unusually sleepy during the day, or trying to improve your routine and still feeling exhausted for long periods, then sometimes the issue may no longer be just about habits. In that case, speaking with a doctor or a qualified professional may be a serious and sensible next step. For most of us, though, the quieter lesson remains enough. You do not need to learn how to sleep less in order to become more capable. What may matter far more is learning how to sleep more deeply, more steadily, and to move through the day in a way that protects recovery instead of constantly leaking it away. Because sometimes what makes life feel less blurred is not adding endless new energy, but simply stopping yourself from losing so much energy in small, repeated ways, night after night, day after day.